Abortion bills draw a big crowd to the State House, and the tax fight is on the airwaves. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. Legislature's been in session. A bunch of people have been under the dome this week. With me to talk about these things, Kent Redfield is back, Professor Emeritus of Political Science, University of Illinois, Springfield. But Kent, welcome. And I know that whole emeritus thing is a joke because you're always working. So you can't help yourself. Rebecca Anzel is making her first voyage on the trip. Welcome. She is a State House reporter for the new Capital News Illinois. And it's good to have you here and good to have you there. Thank you. So I mentioned as the show opened that abortion bills drew big crowds to the State House this week. We have a Democratic legislature. We have a Democratic Governor, J.B. Pritzker, who has said, politically wisely or not, that we are going to be the most progressive state on abortion matters as things happen. Rebecca, give a little recap of what we saw this week.
Yeah, so on Tuesday, one of the bills in the Senate passed out of committee. It is the first one that has gotten that far. It would repeal a measure that makes minors consult with their parents before getting an abortion. Mm-hmm. The other measure is far more controversial. It would repeal and replace Illinois' current abortion law. It creates reproductive health, mm-hmm. as a fundamental right. Mm-hmm. Both opponents and proponents agree that it would make Illinois more progressive in this respect than any other state in the country. That includes New York's law, which drew a lot of controversy as well. That version of the bill in both the House and the Senate are stuck in committee. It doesn't look like they're going anywhere. That could change. Mm-hmm. The session is, still early. The Senate version of that bill is, like I said, stuck. The House version of Senator Sims's bill that just passed out of committee Tuesday is also stuck in committee.
On parental notification.
Yes, right. So Senator Sims's bill is the only one that's moved.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, the Capitol was swarmed on Wednesday. Tons of pro-life supporters.
Activists from all over the state. Apparently there were a lot of people bussed in from all over the place.
Yes. According to Secretary of State's office, there were 4,000 people in the building.
And they closed the doors, or they blocked access to the building for a while because there were so many people.
Safety concerns. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, but that also includes people from a different legislative group or a
different issue.
Yes. Yeah.
There was another. Kent, abortion has been an interesting issue in Illinois all along. With the Democratic legislature. Where is this going? Do you think, and I said earlier, did J.B. Pritzker make like a political mistake by making it so clear how progressive he wants Illinois to be and he wants the legislature to be?
Well, the legislature last year passed an abortion bill,
House Bill 40,
that provided for Medicaid funding for abortions and essentially eliminated a trigger that would said that we would, if the Roe was overturned, we would go back to revert to old legislation.
Yeah. Under states' rights, it would still be legal in Illinois, even if it was overturned federally.
So this is an even more progressive legislature. The governor has said he will sign all of these things, and so there are probably majorities to do most of these things. So the politics is, how quickly do you want to do it? The proponents want to move now with the momentum and not give the opposition a lot of time to gear up. But lots of people have lots of agenda items, and if you want to get a constitutional amendment on the income tax,
progressive income tax,
you want to legalize marijuana, sports betting, they're part of the revenue stream that the governor would like to have. The operating engineers rather than wait for the governor, put in a bill on, or had a bill introduced on
an infrastructure plan.
Infrastructure cap. And so there's a lot of things competing.
This is the Operating Engineers Local 150, right? Which is politically very active and has their own PAC that's
are
doing
we
ads.
Going to do most of this? You would think yes, given the majorities in the legislature and that the governor has said this is one of his priorities. But there's an awful lot to sort out. And if this doesn't all get done this session, there's really no pressure. The Supreme Court's not going to overturn Roe versus Wade. If you don't get sports betting, if you don't get the graduated, or don't get marijuana, and then if you don't pass the constitutional, put the constitutional amendment on the ballot, then you've blown huge holes or just destroyed the governor's budget. So where all of this fits in terms of priorities, because it's going to generate the kind of heat that we saw earlier in the week whenever these things get out.
Just a little more on abortion. Not every Democrat is pro-abortion, not every Republican is pro-life, but there was a group of Republicans that had a press conference this week talking about the pro-life issue. There was a separate group of House, I think mostly House or maybe all Republicans, talking about the tax issue, that they don't want a graduated income tax. They want Illinois to continue to have the flat tax. Republicans have these extraordinary majorities in the House and Senate. It seems like Democrats have.
Right.
It seems like the Republicans view these issues, which are very emotional. Taxes are emotional one way. Abortion is clearly emotional in a lot of ways, and religious and the whole thing. But Rebecca, it seems like the Republicans are trying to use this issue to say, maybe elect more of our members next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Representative Terry Bryant
from Southern Illinois.
Yes, she had made a point of saying that. So as you had mentioned, Governor Pritzker has said time and time again, he wants to make Illinois the most progressive state, in the country for reproductive rights. And she has said just because he was elected governor, she had claimed that, I don't know this to be true, but that only about 5 counties had elected him governor.
Big areas of red cover the more rural counties in the map. Yeah.
She had made the point in the press conference that does not give Governor Pritzker, she used the word mandate. That doesn't give him a mandate to make Illinois this progressive state in that respect. In the rally, one of the organizers had said that politicians who are not pro-life are not to be trusted, and that her supporters are out there to get those politicians who are in favor of abortion out of the state house. So there's a lot of movement to. We
will move that way. Well, I know, and Bishop Paprocki of the Springfield, Thomas Paprocki, who heads the Springfield diocese, which is I think 29 counties in central Illinois. I did hear a little snippet on the radio. I didn't see it myself, but he was talking about the Democrats. He was putting it in political terms that we've got to stop the Democrats, and it's David versus Goliath, and we, the pro-life people, are David fighting this Goliath of political juggernaut that we
and
have
not
to
just
stop
Democrats.
to protect.
He called the news media also.
Oh, is that right?
Goliath.
Is that right?
Yeah.
But most of this is going to pass, and we're talking about moving the regulations involving abortion out of the criminal code and putting them into a different part of the statute, and some of this is not as controversial as parental notification or late term abortion. Some of this, maybe, they may not pass all of it, but they're going to pass most of it. And if you're in that kind of minority that the pro-life movement is in terms of the representatives in Springfield, the governor's office, then yes, your option is to fight the good fight, to use this as a rallying cry to try to bring members in and to build energy and hopefully change some of the electoral dynamics in 2020. But ultimately, are there going to be 60 votes in the House and 30 votes in the Senate and the governor's signature for most of the things in these bills? I think that's probably going to be the case.
And I don't want to minimize, people's strong feelings about this. There are really strongly held beliefs on both sides. Yeah.
So I've done a lot of reporting on the Reproductive Health Act. There's a law firm based in Chicago called the Thomas More Society. They're very, very pro-life.
Right.
They released a report, 13 pages, that they analyzed sort of the legal implications. Now, again, very, very pro-life, so obviously has a slant. But they claim that there are some consequences to passing the Reproductive Health Act. Those range from, there's a line in the Reproductive Health Act that says that a fetus does not have independent rights. So they claim that an unintended consequence would be if a pregnant woman is killed or somebody stabs her in the stomach and it kills her unborn child, that person couldn't be charged with first-degree murder as they could now.
Like not a multiple murder.
Yeah.
The fetus
they
isn't
also
considered.
claim that, so the Reproductive Health Act would repeal a number of current laws that give people protection. So let's say you're a doctor or a nurse. You don't want to take part in an abortion because you have a moral or religious objection. There are laws right now that give you protections from that. Those would be repealed. There's one that would stay on the books, but the Thomas More Society claims that it would become toothless. And so what they claim is if the Reproductive Health Act passes, somebody could conceivably be fired for objecting to help perform an abortion. So there are parts of the bill that a lot of conservatives very strongly object to.
And
not so sure a lot of people, and I mean, so the bill had like about 40 sponsors when I wrote a very long piece about it earlier in the month. It was published March 1st. 3 people have since dropped off of it. There are people who supported HB 40 and voted for it that are not sponsoring it, that you would have expected them to be. There are people like Tara Costa Howard who challenged Peter Breen and won. She had one platform, that was to expand access to reproductive health care. She's not a sponsor. You would expect her to be,
and
because
Peter
that was
Breen,
her
of
one
course,
platform.
was a Republican spokesman for many bills in the House. He got defeated, and he's a lawyer with the Thomas More Society.
So
it all comes full circle.
It's just interesting.
And we're part of a national debate.
Right, and there are provisions in the Illinois law that are going to still be there involving religious liberty and objections in terms of being involved with a number of activities that where if you've got religious objections. And so when this passes, or most of it passes, then we'll move into a litigation strategy, which is still going on in relation to House Bill 40.
Yeah, although there was just some
State Supreme Court turned down a leave to appeal on some aspect of that bill.
They did not overturn it, right? Because and the argument of the Thomas More Society, I believe, brought the lawsuit was that, well, you're funding abortions, but you didn't add anything to the budget. But the courts have said up the line, well, just because you don't have funding for something is no reason to overturn the idea of it, because then you could challenge everything in government.
When you can't win in the legislature, you go to the courts, which will happen in Illinois. Other states are passing restrictive laws in terms of abortion access and abortion clinics, and pro-choice groups not having the votes in the legislature go to the courts, and so we're not likely to see the end of this anytime soon.
And I will say, in our newspaper, once a year there's a time when pro-life groups, have demonstrations everywhere in chains. We usually have 2 full pages of our newspaper with very small type filled with names of people in the Springfield area who support life, they say, and are opposed to abortion. It's a lot of people just in this medium-sized city in central Illinois. So we will hear more about this but let's move on to the tax issue and Governor Pritzker, in what has been his continuing campaign since, which helped him win election, probably because it was such a big part of his campaign, other than the fact maybe people didn't like Bruce Rauner so much. But he wants the progressive income tax, as we've mentioned already. They need a constitutional amendment because our current 1970 Constitution of Illinois says the income tax must be a flat rate. Pritzker says it's only fair to tax richer people more, just like the federal government does, just like most states do. He has now put out brackets that wouldn't be part of the constitutional amendment but would be part of a bill to say that only 3% of wage earners would have to pay more, those who make over $250,000 a year. He went to Southern Illinois this last week. He met with mayors. Was it in Belleville? It was somewhere. Yes, it was in Belleville to promote that plan. He is funding, or at least partially funding, a group called Think Big Illinois, which takes off on his campaign theme of, you know, I do big things. He's making a little fun of the fact that his diets haven't worked as well as they should, but it is what it is. And they put out an advertisement that's apparently running on TV already, talking about only 3% of you will pay more, this is fair. And then Ideas Illinois, which is a business-oriented group led by Greg Bays, who just stepped down as a longtime president and CEO of the Illinois Manufacturers Association, talks about broken promises, and this will just give Madigan and Pritzker the opportunity to raise everybody in the middle class's taxes, which is their tactic to say it's not going to be just the top 3%. They're not going to make enough money. If you give them this change in the Constitution, the middle class will be hurt. So, Kent, this is another one where the governor really wants to get this constitutional amendment on the ballot, which won't even be voted on by voters then until November of 2020. But how soon are we going to see action?
Well, it appears that they want to push this session, and there is some question about, you know, whether they're going to try to move it before they go out of town at the, you know, for the spring break. Or after they come back. But
right, and the whole session in the spring is supposed to end at the end of May now. As years in the past, it used to be the end of June, but now it's the end of May. So they don't have that much time to get this done.
No, but they do have the momentum. There's broad support for the idea of a graduated income tax, and the framing from the proponents of we're only hitting 3% of the population is a very powerful argument. And as you said, they're up on TV. So now we're going to start seeing ads from both sides saying, you know, to influence the votes of legislators, because this is something the legislature has to vote on in order to get it on the ballot for 2 years from now. The opposition is trying to frame it in a couple of different ways. Probably the most effective framing is kind of, you know, we're giving the legislature a blank check.
Right.
Can you trust them? They say 3% now and 97% don't be touched, but you know, how do you know, sort of thing? Because we're not going to be, the voters are not going to vote on a specific tax proposal. They're just going to vote on whether or not the legislature should have the option of doing a graduated income tax. And so it's an interesting campaign. We don't know a lot about the money, although the Pritzker side has said they'll start disclosing. Ultimately, if it gets on the ballot, both sides. Oh,
you mean the money is who's funding these groups that are putting the TV ads, right? And a lot of news stories call them dark money groups because they don't have to disclose.
Right.
But Think Big Illinois says at some point they will disclose donors. We don't know if that means amounts or just who. But we know that Governor Pritzker has donated.
And the numbers are close. I mean, you have to get 60% in both chambers. And so with 74 Democrats, you're only talking about losing 3 people.
Right, you need 71, yeah.
If in fact you get no Republican support. So this is going to be, you know, a tough roll call. It is absolutely fundamental to the governor's budget plan, because we're doing 2 years of kind of getting through it budgets in order to get to that third year when we could get 3.2 billion or whatever the number happens to be from having you know, instituting his plan for the graduated income tax. So the stakes are incredibly high, and of necessity, this is kind of the focus of you know, the legislature and the governor's office, and it may squeeze a lot of other things out. So you're going to see a lot of ads on the newspaper in a very short, and probably newspaper ads, lots of ads on the TV, very short period of time, talking about something where you really don't know exactly what the legislature is going to be voting for in the spring of 2021 if we get to that point. It's a very unusual situation.
That it is. Well, one of the other keys, and Kent, you mentioned it earlier, the governor wants to legalize marijuana for recreational use. It's already legal in Illinois for medical use for certain ailments. And Rebecca, our state treasurer, Michael Frericks, has had a press conference and made an announcement saying he's trying to change banking laws because right now marijuana is still considered an illegal drug at the federal level, so banks that are regulated by the feds often don't want to loan money or do business with pot dealers. So what's the situation with that, and does a change in state law solve much?
Yeah, because the federal government considers marijuana to be illegal, any bank that does a transaction related to marijuana, it's considered money laundering, and so obviously banks want nothing to do with it.
That's not a good thing.
Frericks is pushing a bill that would prevent the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation from going after banks that are doing business with the marijuana industry. That would kind of free them up to help them. Right now, the situation is such that Illinois has the medical program. They have to operate in cash, which is dangerous.
Yeah, well, it's dangerous. If you're operating in cash, then if you're not doing credit card transactions, it's harder to follow.
Yeah.
So people might worry that, not to say any particular business would be skimming the money, but if it's in cash, you don't know. And then there's also, what do you do with the cash? And then if you're walking out the back door at night with a bag full of it, do people notice that, and is it a dangerous situation? We'll see. But Kent, with the Feds still overseeing most banks, I don't know if this solves the whole problem.
Well, you're just trying to get the comfort level up a bit. Now, and obviously, we have not only Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, but California now involved with this, which is a huge state in the largest economy and the largest state in the country. And so, yes, the feds tomorrow could wreak havoc with recreational marijuana across the country. They don't. Doesn't seem to be any indication that they want to make that a very high priority. But we are dealing with things that are against federal law.
Right. Well,
and it's a very, very touchy situation that you would hope would get resolved at the federal level, because Illinois is probably going to legalize recreational marijuana. It's not going to be the last state, and so we hope the feds will catch up.
Right, and again, we're not sure that they're going to do this because we still have some law enforcement against it. We have some legislators that have been, putting together a resolution. Marty Moylan is a state representative, Democrat from the suburbs, who has, been saying let's go slow. But that again could mess up Governor Pritzker's view that we're going to get some hundreds of millions of dollars out of this, even in the first year for licensing.
There's a lot of money there, and if you remember when we legalized gambling as economic development, riverboat gambling as economic development for depressed river towns, we're all of these, we got to go slow, we got to be careful, we don't want to get into the evil gambling business, and now it's wall to wall, and so the idea that you're going to tamp this down and that it isn't the wave of the future, I think is probably a little bit of whistling past the graveyard, but we shall see. I mean, again, very complicated. Who gets cut in, who gets cut out.
And there's a big movement that not only current marijuana growers or the stores that market them should be involved, because certainly Juliana Stratton, the lieutenant governor, has talked, people in the African American community in the inner city in Chicago should be able to get into this business. So that means, where does the capital come from? Because so much of it is capital intensive if you need a growing facility and a distribution chain and very secure stores with lots of cameras and locks and that kind of thing.
But you combine a majority of the population, probably a majority of the legislature, a tremendous amount of money to be made in general, and then this being something that seems to be a key component of the governor's long-term, revenue plans, and that's a lot of momentum pushing in the same direction.
Well, we'll see where that one goes. It's again kind of high on the governor's list of agenda items. So, small curveball here because we are taping the show before the Friday expected appearance of Stormy Daniels. People might have heard of her. Her real name is Stephanie Clifford. She, alleged having an affair with President Trump. She is coming to Springfield to do a book signing at Deja Vu, which is a adult club in Springfield. Before that, however, she's supposed to be at the state capitol on Friday. And so people watching may have heard of this by then. She is supposed to be having a news conference which is opposing, it's for repeal of a law, which is the Live Adult Entertainment Facility Surcharge Act. Because a few years ago, there was a bill passed. Sheila Simon was lieutenant governor. She pushed it strongly to fund rape crisis centers with a per customer charge at the door of strip clubs that serve alcohol, because they did it, I think, in association with the alcohol clubs. So I don't know if either of you want to comment on this, but this is not going to be your typical day, or will not have been your typical day in Springfield.
Fridays are usually dead at the Capitol, and I think the press corps is all going to show up to work.
Yes.
But we don't know anything about when she's coming, just that she will be at Deja Vu by mid-afternoon.
Right,
for
and
book
apparently
signing,
a show later in the evening, and are we advertising? I don't know. Anyway, Kent, have you seen anything like this in Springfield?
There have been a few times when we have had people of some notoriety come and talk about their particular cause. I don't remember anything, in terms of the adult film industry,
right.
but that this is about democracy, the democratic process, petitioning your government for redress of grievances, and so
here we are in the middle of another national story.
Yep.
I'm going to say one other thing on another quick subject. The Illinois State Museum, which was closed for most of a year under Governor Rauner, then reopened with a charge to most people to get in. They have regained their accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums. So things are on the upswing, even though they lost their entire top tier of staff at that time, and the doors were locked for several months during the budget impasse. Not sure what that was all about, but Governor Rauner was there when they reopened it, which was a little weird. He got a couple of jeers for that. On that note, Kent Redfield, thank you. Rebecca Anzel, thank you. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.